This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Welcome to this episode of Forge Daily. I'm your host, Mackenzie Barwell, checking in October 7th, 2024. On Sunday, Forge FC clinching the regular season CPL title for the second time in club history. Naturally, they'll get the day off today after a red-eye flight last night. So here to discuss what this all means and look ahead to the playoffs is former Forge player, now CPL expert, Emery Welshman. Okay, Emery, welcome back to Forge Daily. Thanks for joining me again. The people were really excited to see you last time.
Thanks for having me. Had a really good time.
We've got a lot to talk about today, beginning with this recent win in Forge FC's second regular season title clinch.
Yep.
But then obviously looking ahead to the playoffs in these last 2 or 3 regular season games. So let's start with that 1-0 victory over Valour. I'm assuming you got a chance to watch the game.
Yeah, it was a good game. To be fair, it was one of the few times I would say that Forge have gone to Winnipeg and really dominated the game from start to finish. There were little, sketchy moments at the end where free kicks and corner kicks were just dumped into the box. Valour was throwing the kitchen sink at it, and rightfully so. They're in a playoff spot as well. They're fighting for that last playoff spot. But Forge went there professionally, did the business. And like I said, that was not always the case when I was there with Forge. Going to Winnipeg was honestly the toughest place to go and play. Nobody liked that trip. The pitch was always very difficult. It was a big, bouncy, just almost concrete field and 0 fans. Big stadium. It was just such a environment that just played against like a Forge team or any other team that really goes there, to be honest. So going there to me was the most difficult place to go and get a result. The travel is difficult. The area is difficult to play in. But having said that, they went and did their business and they secured the championship there. They secured the regular Shield championship there. And like you mentioned, their second one of their career, of their history. And hopefully they got to just, continue writing history, where it was a little taboo thing for us when we were for myself, when we were there, that there's been no regular season champion that has gone on to win the playoffs. So this is a chance for Forge to rewrite history, because if you remember the last time Forge did that, I was part of that team that went on that historic Champions League run, and we ended up losing that home match to Pacific. And so that would have been, without that little bump in their history, that this could potentially be 5 championships in a row. But now they got to go and, again, change history, rewrite their own history, and be the first team to win the regular season, and now go on to be the first team to win the playoffs.
Yeah, now that's the question, I guess. Can they do the double? That's honestly, to your point about Forge going to Winnipeg and how difficult of a trip that is. I noticed that how big the stadium was yesterday on the broadcast.
It's massive. It is massive.
Luckily they got the renovation though, Emery, so it's not as maybe concrete as it once was.
Okay. So the turf is at least done over, I'm assuming, from the last few years, so that's nice.
Okay, well, I want to talk just a little bit more in depth about this Valour game before we move on and highlight the center midfield. I think if you're watching the broadcast, and for anyone listening and could hear the play-by-play, they knew how important they were, just because of how much Ali, Bekks, Noah were in the conversation. And even if you look at that first and only goal for Forge, it was another combination between Bekks and Noah. So yeah. How important do you see them being in their success and in terms of like their role that they've had in recent games?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's just the Forge machine at this moment. You plug any player in there and they're going to get the job done. You see that with the beginning of the season when Borges was part of that trio as well. Cisse's been in there. There's been a lot of players that could come in and come out of that 3 midfield scenario and still provide the results. You did bring up the Bekks, Ali, and Noah combination, and they've been flying. I saw the game again with the goal, and I first thought to myself was another Bekks and Noah combination. These guys are flying. They know where they are on the field. They're very similar characteristics as people in the locker room and how they present themselves on the pitch. So I'm not shocked at all that those two have a really good connection going. This is just my speculation. I feel like Noah's kind of an understudy to Bekks, so the more he can soak up the information that Bekks presents to him, the more he can, emulate what Bekks carries, is just better for Forge. They can have two, captains in a sense that have the same mentality, the same winning sense. And so the two of them combining for another goal, another assist is perfect. It's great to go into playoffs with that because it shows you that you don't always need your strikers to score goals. If your center mids can provide it, if your wingers can provide it, that's great.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think the understudy word is perfect to describe it because even when Kyle isn't on the field, Noah is now acting as that leader, sometimes wearing the armband, sometimes not.
Yep.
But to your point, it's kind of whoever's in there can get the job done. And I'll talk about Cisse a little bit later. But I want to get your opinion on what happens after this result. If you're on this team, you win the regular season, obviously you want to acknowledge that accomplishment. But at the same time, you know that the job's not done, right? The playoffs are coming, still a few more regular season games. So what would you imagine Saturday night looking like? And even in the locker room, how do the coaching staff approach that, but also the leadership on this team to make sure everybody still has that overarching goal in their head?
If I'm not mistaken, it was Sunday night, no? Was it the Sunday afternoon game? So even worse. Nobody's partying Sunday night in Winnipeg. So I think those guys might have had a little bit of a celebration for themselves. Maybe a few of them went out for something quick, but I think their mindset was really, let's get on this red eye back to Hamilton and let's recharge, regenerate. Maybe they're doing something today. I'm not sure what that situation was. I knew when Forge won the regular season in 2022, we didn't really celebrate it that much, to be honest, because we were on the road again for I think it was a Champions League game in Costa Rica or one of those places. So we didn't really have much time to celebrate because the next game was quick. And so you can't really set yourself back with making silly decisions like that. But they do have a good week until their next game. Maybe they are celebrating because they're in a rare position. They're a rare air of professional soccer where they're used to winning. And you can ask Kyle, you can ask some of the other players that have played in different positions before. That's not always the case, right? So you should celebrate every trophy, every championship, not, like it's the World Cup or anything, but make sure you acknowledge it and know how difficult that really is because there's some proper pros that have gone out there that have never really won anything in their careers, but they've had great Premier League careers, great careers in Italy and Spain and stuff, but never really won anything. So they need to understand that what they're doing is very special. What they're doing is very rare. And yes, you want that culture to be all about winning, but you don't want to take it for granted because, like I said, players like Bekks, who was there before Forge and playing professionally, knows that it's so hard to go win a trophy, to go win the supporter shield. That's a very difficult thing to do. But also now they need to know that it's even harder to win that and still be motivated to win the playoffs. I was in that position at Cincinnati where we broke records for USL's points, goals, wins, all these great things done in 2018, I want to say. And then by the time playoffs came, we were a second round knockout. The team was just almost, we lost legs. We were just so focused on winning the supporter shields, a trophy at least, that once the playoffs came, we kind of just lost focus. We were kind of, I don't want to say over it in a sense because that's not the right term, but we were so dead by the time playoffs came that it's a long, grueling season where I do see how teams that just sneak into the playoffs end up having better playoff runs because they're just going off momentum. Where Forge just had to do this throughout the year. They have the most goals in the league. They have the second least goals against, and they have the most wins. So they have been dominant from the start of the season to now, which is a lot harder to do than I think it is catching fire this last month of season, where a team just puts together a few strings of wins and then goes to playoffs and continues that. So I think what Forge has done is special. It's great. The other teams that have done this before have shown how difficult it is to do that and now win the playoffs as well. So I think that's the major challenge for Forge now.
Yeah. And it'll be hard to strike a balance between one, as you said, acknowledging what they're doing is special and knowing that the regular season title in itself is an accomplishment worth celebrating,
Yeah.
but two, maintaining that motivation and drive so that when this fifth team comes into the playoffs, they don't sneak up on them, right? But at the same time, it is a Sunday night, to your point. There's really not much. My bad. But yeah, I want to talk about these last few games, Emery, because Ottawa is coming to Hamilton this weekend, and they're in second right now. So there's a good chance if they maintain some form to close it out, they'll meet Forge again in the first round of the playoffs. Having been a part of a similar situation, how do you stay sharp in these last games, knowing that realistically there aren't any consequences or like tangible or objective consequences if there is a poor result?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to gauge because you never know what Ottawa's going to do. Also, you don't know if Ottawa wants that first round playoff game against Forge, where if they do lose, they have to go down a different, more difficult route for them, so to speak. Where if they do win that, they go straight to the final. So you never know what the team's thinking. You never know what the game plan is. Forge is obviously secured first place. I think they're not going to go into this game overthinking things too much. I would see it more as getting players' fitness back, maybe getting some players, maybe just some confidence back. Some players are still short a little bit of confidence in their form and the way they play. And I think this is a game where you could go out there and not treat it like a nothing game, but kind of treat it as a game. Okay, this is prepping us for playoffs. We're going to need our horses. We're going to need our dogs. Show us who's out there. Show us who's ready. Show us who's available for what we call in back when I was playing in the Middle East, it was called the money time. Playoff football was called the money time there, where that's where the top players show their character. That's where the clutch players, as we would speak, show up. And so to speak, Forge has been very clutch throughout playoffs, right? So now it's a chance for Forge to internally look at who our clutch players are and who can kind of step up in these situations where you guys might not have had the best season individually, but now is a time that we need everybody. Everybody needs to be playing, hitting all cylinders, and it's a good opportunity to play a good team on Saturday.
Money time. I like that. Yeah, no, I think you're right, though. I think that's probably the way that they're. And I'll ask Bobby the same thing on Wednesday, but I'm sure that's a similar response to what I'll get from him. You talked about certain players maybe not having their peak individual performances throughout the season and this being the time to do it, or even just gaining that comfortability and confidence back with these last few games. Borges and Cisse have been out. We saw that again on Sunday. How did you notice their absence, and what do you think, if that continues to be the case, how do you think that'll impact the team going forward?
I'm not 100% sure what the injuries or the issues are with the players, but my mindset obviously is going straight to they want to get them as fit and ready as possible for playoffs. So I think they could be available for these games, but I think the smarter thing to do, which is coming from obviously the medical side of the team and the higher ups in the team, is that let these players get back fresh, let these players get back, to as close to 100% as possible for the playoffs, because that's when it matters. I think Forge always knew that they would have one or two extra games to play out this regular season. And so now they have this extra game that they don't necessarily need to force these players out on the field. They got the business done against Valour, and luckily they don't have to go into this high pressure situation this Saturday needing to win to get the regular season. They clinched it. They took care of business. So they don't need to force those players out on the field Saturday without any disregard to their health, right? Those players need to just get healthy, get back to their best. And I think that's what I see when those players are missing these games, is that we're just getting them ready for playoffs. That's what's important. That's what matters at this point.
And huge, you're right that this weekend isn't make or break. So they're not forced to come on maybe earlier than they're ready for.
Yeah.
Naturally, at the end of the broadcast on Sunday, they were questioning whether or not Bobby would win Coach of the Year. Obviously, everyone knows that is something that he has yet to receive. What are your thoughts on that, Emery? What do you see happening? Is this something you could see in Bobby's future?
Arguably, I could say that he should have won it almost every single year, right? So I feel like the measuring stick for Bobby is a little different than most teams, because most teams see Forge having this special team that Bobby had nothing to do with for whatever reason. But take most of those coaches and put them in Forge's shoes, and they're not going to be the same team. And I just know that firsthand from speaking to players throughout the league and from seeing players who've come to Forge and left Forge and gone to different places. They've all said the same thing, that like Bobby's the one that runs the ship. Bobby's the one that's built together such a strong foundation that it's almost to his detriment where he doesn't get the credit for it because the team is such a well-ran machine. And like I've said before, it's just the Forge machine. You play a player here, a player there. They come in, they come out. It's the machine that works. And sometimes Bobby doesn't get the credit he deserves because of that, where I definitely don't see any other argument than him winning the Coach of the Year trophy this year, where again, he just wants, Bobby's very upfront with what he tells us in the sense that he doesn't care about those individual accolades for himself, or he just wants the team to win another Shield, another CPL playoff trophy now. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be the conversation for him. I think it might be like an inside joke with the coaching staff over there that he might lose another one, but he'll take the trophy. But I think he definitely deserves it. I think he deserved it last year and the year before that. So I'm obviously not going to be the right person to tell you this stuff because I've gotten it wrong the last few years. So I think he does deserve it again. I think he does deserve it this year. And it would be shock if he doesn't. But again, he's not one that's going to hold those individual accolades to himself. I think he's seen what he's built with this Forge, with Sigma as well, with the players that have gone up and down from what Bobby's built. And I think that is all the individual accolades he needs. He just knows that he's built such a powerhouse in Ontario soccer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And at this point, Emery, I feel like he enjoys the bit of having gotten snubbed.
I think he does too.
Where like his responses are always so funny and just upfront. Okay, let's move on now. As we said, one more team, we're waiting for that fifth and final spot, but York, Ottawa, Calgary, Forge, all having clinched. For 2024, who do you see posing the biggest threat to Forge in the playoffs with those teams I just rhymed off?
I personally see Ottawa giving them the biggest challenge in playoffs, and that's just from collectively seeing what they built in the offseason. I think we spoke about this last time I was on it, that they just put a collection of some of the best CPL players together. They're second place right now, I think, from after this weekend's results. And I think they could be the one to pose the biggest threat to Forge. I don't think Forge should be too worried about the other two teams, but you can never say that. It's playoff soccer, it's playoff football. Anything can happen. They have Calgary's number when it comes to playoff games, and they've had York's number when it comes to this entire calendar year. But again, it's just a one game knockout, so anything can happen. One of those teams might just grind it out to PKs, and again, anything can happen. That fifth spot's going to be very interesting. I do think Vancouver's going to notch it. They have 2 games left. One's against Ottawa, which I don't see them getting anything out of that, but I do think they could get something out of that Valour game, which would push them over the line, where Pacific has 2 tough games. I want to say they play Ottawa and Forge, and I don't think any of those teams are going to give Pacific anything from those games, maybe a draw at best. But I think Vancouver really has to look at that Valour game and say this is a must-win, period. And if they could sneak a point against Ottawa or something, then that would be great. But I do see just the strength of schedule. They're going to be home for that Valour game as well. I think those are going to be the deciding factors. Having said that, Forge is already locked up first place. Pacific's last game is going to be against Forge at home for Pacific. That could be one of those games where Forge kind of takes their foot off the gas, maybe plays some of the younger players, some players that needed some minutes. That could also be a deciding game for Pacific's season.
Yeah, you make a good point. But also Vancouver FC, we saw them particularly toward the beginning of the season go for a run and really show what they're capable of. Now, them and Pacific, both with 28 points, and then Halifax and Valour, both with 27. So you're right, we can't really count anyone out at this point. But it'll be interesting to see how that last one with Forge and Pacific unfolds. With regards to the playoff format, Emery, as I'm sure you know, it was changed last season so that the first and second place team will play each other in the first round, as well as the fourth and fifth. Just to refresh everyone's memory, I'll quickly skim over. The winner of that fourth and fifth match will go on to play the loser of the first and second matchup, and the winner of that game will go direct ticket to the finals, right?
Yes.
What do you make of this new structure? We didn't talk about this last time. It's kind of confusing. If I try and explain it, I feel like I get tripped up on my words.
Yeah, it's confusing to explain like that, but once you look at the format itself, it makes a lot of sense, especially where you see just the arrows say you go here, you go there, where you win. That's a lot easier to see. But fortunately enough for me, I didn't have to play in this format, so I didn't have to deal with it. I could imagine the players weren't too thrilled with this format either. Like, why change things around? Why always trying to be different? First, away goals in the Canadian Championship game is still a thing, and now we're doing this crazy playoff thing. Awesome, great. We want to be different. Okay. But I'm not the biggest fan of it. I don't see why the first team just doesn't, get maybe another round bye. But I think it's just to bring in another team into the playoff structure. And it does give the first and second team kind of that advantage. If you do lose that first game, you have another game to play, more playoff games, more revenue for the league. I think it makes sense in that way. And you get to see the best teams and players play again, which if they get knocked out in that first round, you might not see one of the best teams CPL has provided. You might not see some of the best players because they might move on to something else. So I guess it's an opportunity to just continue showcase the product, continue showcase the talent, and I'm all for that. I always want the best for these players, the best for these teams, and so if that's one of the ways that they can do that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, you make some good points, but at the same time, I can see why you'd be maybe thrown off, as well as some of the players, when they change what's been in place for so long. And if the perspective is anything like it is on away goals, it's probably not too favorable.
Yeah, no.
All right, Emery. Well, let's reconvene as the playoffs go on. I'm sure this will not be our last conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. You always have great insight, so thank you.
No, thank you. Again, had a lot of fun and looking forward to more. Yep.
That'll conclude today's episode. As Emery and I talked about, the regular season not done yet. Forge FC to take on Atletico Ottawa here at home on Saturday. This could be the team they'll play on the 27th for the first round of playoffs, so this won't be a game you want to miss. Plus, regardless of the result, they will lift the CPL shield. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Keep an eye out for Behind the Beard and Max Access this week. Still more to come on the audio network.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.